Hello and welcome to this webinar today. My name is Becca Dare, the President of the International Compliance Association. Today we're going to look at such an important topic, exploring a topic that really, wherever I travel in the world, is really the number one challenge, I guess, facing those of us working in compliance, financial crime, and it's fraud. Whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, we're going to look at the tidal wave, really, of the current fraud landscape across the Asia-Pacific region, the trends, and also maybe what we can do in the future for Asian-Pacific banks as well in this space. So really looking forward to today's session. But I'd like to now introduce my panel. And I'm going to start, really, if I may, with Beaver Chua, who's Managing Director and Head of Group Anti-Fraud at OCBC.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beaver Chua. I'm from OCBC Bank. I run the group anti-fraud function for OCBC. And over the last few years, we have been rapidly expanding the team across Asia Pacific because of the shift in trend whereby scams and fraud has largely been growing, particularly in the digital space. And here I am discussing with the panelists here on the same topic.
Okay, thank you. Ritezh, I would like to introduce next. So Ritezh Bhatia, who's founder of V4WEB CYBERSECURITY. Hi, Ritezh, great to see you again. Welcome. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Hi, Pekka, and great to see you again after a year. And it was a great conversation what we had last year in Mumbai. So guys, hi, I'm Ritezh Bhatia from the city called Mumbai, the financial capital of India. And I'm into cybercrime investigations, been in this line for almost 22 years. I do cybersecurity implementation, and I'm a certified fraud examiner and also a data privacy consultant. I'm a 4-time TEDx speaker, and I frequently keep coming on news channels, both national and international, to talk about the trending cybercrimes. Thanks, Becca.
Thanks, Ritezh. Great to see you too. Yeah, I really enjoy my visits to India. So next time I'm there, please, let's connect again. Great to see you. And again, always enjoy hearing you as well. I love your bookcase as well, by the way. It's even though it's a virtual one, it looks great. So welcome. Thank you very much. Gregory, I'm going to introduce Gregory now, and I had the privilege of catching up with Gregory in Hong Kong recently as well. So Gregory Mandoli, who's a very interesting background, but is a Supervisory Special Agent at Homeland Security Investigations based out of Hong Kong. So Gregory, hi, great to see you again. Hey. Welcome. And would you mind sort of introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Yeah, absolutely. One, thank you for having me. And hello to my other co-presenters and everyone else there out there online. I'm talking to you from my office at the consulate in Hong Kong, where I'm assigned with Homeland Security Investigations, which is the largest investigative body within the Department of Homeland Security, where I have oversight of a team that's located here with sister teams in Taipei, Guangzhou, and Beijing. We investigate a full spectrum of criminal activity, essentially any person or thing with a nexus to the U.S. we have an interest in. Particularly for me and my background, I've been focused on financial crime investigations throughout my 25-year career. I've been in Hong Kong the last 4+ years. Prior to that, I was in Los Angeles, where I worked on standing up a financial crime task force, El Camino Real. Prior to that, I was in London, working on the financial or managing the financial portfolio there, DC, and then began my career in my hometown of San Francisco. Way back in the day, where I had assignments on the Joint Terrorism Task Force at the FBI, working counterterrorism finance.
Fantastic, Greg. And you know, I'm really looking forward again to hearing your perspective and on the unique work that Homeland Security does in this space. And I know you've got a lot of really fascinating insights to share. So the topic today is so big that it's going to be affecting everyone on this call. every organization, every individual. So please, do ask your questions of our panel. Do raise any points or comments you have. And also, we're going to give you some polls as well. So please pop your questions in the Q&A for our panel as we go through the session today. So I can see lots of names coming in now. Looks like we've got Macau, Malaysia, thank you. Nepal, good to see someone from Nepal visited recently, lovely. Another Filipino person here, Liao. So look, wherever you are in the world, welcome. I think we're going to start. Here you all come. Brunei, hello, Mohammed. Yes, look at this panel. We've got a really diverse Papua New Guinea. Chris, hi, welcome. Niraj in Singapore again. So look, wherever you are, welcome. Looking forward to hearing from you throughout the day. We've got a huge turnout for this webinar, unsurprisingly. Let's start with a bit of an overview of the evolving fraud landscapes in the Asia-Pacific region. And maybe, Beaver, if I could start with you. Can you give us some insights into what's happening in the world of fraud in 2024? And specifically from your perspective, Beaver, what is the latest typologies? What trends are you seeing in your role?
I think over the last year or so, I think what caught us in a big way was the malware scam. I think the banking industry in Singapore and even in Malaysia was not really expecting the malware scam to come in a big way. I think we used to have the typical phishing scam, the job scam, the e-commerce scam, and the investment scam. That's still happening, but what took us by surprise was how fast the malware scam has been evolving and actually how fast it hits the entire landscape over the last year. I think with the banks fortifying their defenses across the region, I think that's one area that we are still watching closely. It has reached, in COVID terms, an endemic point in the fight against the malware. It's not completely gone, but it has reached a stable state where it's endemic. It's happening sporadically, but the banks in Singapore particularly has fortified ourselves well against the scam. But like I said earlier, we are watching the space. You never know when it's going to be evolving as we speak, and then come back in another form and a way to hit us as well. So everybody's watching. So in between that, you'll notice from Singapore and soon across the region where we have presence, we'll be rolling out some form of a defense. I think the latest one that we rolled out, that was pretty successful, is the money lock, where we allowed the customers to lock away a certain amount of funds which they want to protect. And that way we keep it offline so that it's away from the scammers or away from some malware. So we are working on other projects as well as an industry. So that's where we are today in Singapore and across the region as well, where we have presence.
Great, thank you, Beaver. Interesting to hear that, and that also the developments in terms of countering some of these emerging threats as well. Okay, well, Gregory, why don't I come to you next, if I may? Sure. And can you give us maybe some insights from what you're seeing from law enforcement's perspective on fraud? What are the trends across the Asia Pacific region that are manifesting for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I've been in this position here just over 4 years. When I came in, the kind of fraud du jour at that time, or the cyber-enabled crime at the time, was business email compromise. That's fallen off more, and now you see more pig butchering that's going on. But I think the more important perspective from the law enforcement side is the actual typology is not that relevant to us because it's all just predatory. What is of concern to us are the actors that are involved in these various schema and the ones that are driving the fraud. What you've seen over the course of time, so even going back to, say, when I was in London, and a lot of the fraud at that time was this high yield investment fraud, boiler room type stuff, right? And that construct is very similar to pig butchering. You have some sophistication there, not only in your victim, but in the perpetrator, in the multi-layers of conspirators that are involved. You get passed off from your contact agent to the sales agent to the control agent on forward. So that level of sophistication is worrisome. But what you see in pig butchering, for example, follows that same sort of hierarchy. The problem that you've got is it's coming out of these call centers, which are organized crime oriented or managed. And they also intersect with other crime typologies, such as, offshore gambling or onshore gambling even, narcotics trafficking. So these are the same sorts of groups, the network theory that an organization like mine is aimed to tackle. So, like I said, we're not so concerned about whether this is a romance scam, a high yield investment fraud, or pig butchering in terms of the approach. The execution and then the perpetrator is kind of the main target for us.
Great. And that level of sophistication you're still seeing very much. And we've certainly been involved in the ICA in many events looking at the reality of things like pig butchering scams and the level of sophistication in terms of the entrapment of victims at both sides of that fraud are frightening, aren't they? You continue to see that high level of sophistication, Greg?
Well, but it's a polycrime environment. So it's not just an organization that, going back to like the boiler rooms, you had an organization there that those were certain fraudsters that were learned in the art of, boiler room execution. They had their dummy lists and they had the actual fraud that was, happening in the US, but the sales in Barcelona and that kind of thing. Here you have, like I said, organized crime groups that are involved in human trafficking. So they're pulling in the operators, the people that are online or making those phone calls and building the rapport with the victims are themselves victims.
Yeah.
Right. In this confluence of those organized crime groups, then with other organized crime groups, right? The triads with the Mexican Colombian cartels, for example. So that empowerment, that sort of nexus becomes very, very troublesome and worrisome. And keep in mind, the context is, where are we going to go when we look out into the metaverse and artificial intelligence, which is not the context of this conversation, but right, that's the looming threat. Like that's the next order of things.
Yeah, obviously. Well, that's a brilliant segue, Greg, into talking to Ritezh, I think, about the digital world, really, and this is obviously a space that you really focus on, Ritezh, in your work. So obviously we know a lot of the threats here are in the digital world, things like malware, ransomware. We've already heard from Beaver on this as well. So what from your perspective, what are you seeing around the risks in the fraud prevention space? What's happening in your world?
Pekka, a lot is happening. And, after hearing Gregory and Beaver, I think India has, at least in India, what we know is we got a variety of scams and something like new age. For us, this malware, ransomware are like old things. The kind of AI-based crimes that are happening over here, I mean, on a daily basis, I think we're losing like millions of dollars. I was just thinking, you really got to meet the cyber criminals over here who are amazing artists. And just look at, yeah, I mean, 5 years back when I gave my first TEDx talk, I've already spoken 4 times on this platform. That time I spoke about the unknown, unheard, and unseen cybercrimes. It's there on YouTube. And half the audience at that point of time, out of those 200 odd people, they said, this sounds like a Black Mirror episode. This can never happen. And just imagine we are in that era. So for me, all these like mule accounts, KYC frauds and card frauds and all are something like very outdated. What we have, the next 5 years are going to be about the AI-based cybercrimes. And why start somewhere else? You look at in Hong Kong itself, the people from Hong Kong, the participants from Hong Kong would agree to that. Very recently, 4 people came on a Zoom call. Okay, like the way we are sitting, they were there on a Zoom call or a virtual call, and there was a CFO, there were 2 other senior people, and there was this finance guy. And they were discussing that, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. And then they told the finance guy that, listen, you please transfer this, like, the $25 million. And that fellow transferred the $25 million. But the thing is, the other three people were deep fakes. So, like, you really need to be sure whether it is Ritezh Bhatia talking to you or the deep fake of Ritezh Bhatia talking to you. So,
Ritezh, is it really you? Is it really you?
Well, yeah, it is me. So that is why you need to ask some questions wherein you know that this can't be scripted. So the way, like, we have the voice cloning that's going on, and that is, I mean, you look at the voice cloning, it's happening so frequently. So a German CEO calls a British CEO and tells him, listen, I need you to transfer $243,000 and to a Hungarian supplier. He does that. Later on, he comes to know it was not him, but it was his cloned voice, which was, used, done from the AI. So much of data, our voice, our video, we have given to the Instagrams and to the YouTubes and to the Facebooks of the world, that it is going to now hit us back. So there's a lot, so for me, the malwares and the ransomwares, I think what the banking industry or the ones who are the investigators, in other countries, they should really take lessons from India as to what all is happening, and we are yet not able to control it over here. When Gregory was mentioning about the pig butchering scams and about these cartels, he's absolutely right. All this money which is taken from the countries converted into crypto, and there is no traceability. So there's a lot happening. But for the financial sector, I would tell them that they're third party, the insider threats. Because now from the dark web, they are offering as high as 40% if you leak the credential to them. The moment you give out the credential, so 40% of the amount that you get from a bank, can you imagine? This employee will never ever have to work. You just need to drop the credentials on the dark web, you get paid. So insider threats, your third party vendors, they are not like really secured. They don't understand the risk. Banks are opening accounts without doing proper KYCs. The eKYCs, what we are talking about, one of the participants mentioned about eKYC. That's actually for a fact, because it's so easy now to create it, using an artificial intelligence. So the threat is going to just multiply 10 times is what I would say.
Yeah, Ritezh, and I think we were all amazed with that case in Hong Kong about the deep fake and not amazed actually. You guys will know that the way we're going with this, and I recorded some recordings in the UK recently for our company for an AI avatar of me, and I'll be intrigued to see the results, because I haven't seen the demos of the technology. It's really moving quickly. Now, before we all admit defeat to these incredibly sophisticated fraudsters, we are going to talk about how we can combat this. So I'm going to ask the guys here what their views are in terms of building the defenses against this. And the good news is, our audience, we do have our poll ready to go. Yeah, really interesting. You talked about the expectations around the use of technology, and I know from seeing some presentations recently about the angle that a phone is consistently held at, or if it's, for example, charged 100% of the time, always indicates maybe it's on a wall somewhere in a scam center, doesn't it? These are really interesting kind of developments, that it's a bit of an arms race between firms and the fraudsters, isn't it, in this space? Here we go. Finally got the poll question up. So you can see the question: what types of fraud or other cyber-related crime has your organization faced recently? So please, we'll take a moment or so, just leave that open. We'll give you about sort of 60 seconds to vote on that one as well. And then we'll digest and we'll throw the answers to our esteemed panel and get their insights into that. Okay.
Hey, Pekka, while those results are coming in, can I just carry forward the artistic theme and make a comment on that?
Please.
So, while the creativity is there and the result of anybody's creation will be different, the materials that go into it are the same oftentimes. And so what comes back is still the infrastructure utilized to perpetuate the crime, right? The use of straw accounts or mule accounts, things like that, that has not changed. The scale of it might have changed, but again, you know, and I always think back to Wells Fargo and just that cultural manifestation within a bank to open accounts. And that is really where the weakness lies in just the traditional financial systems. I mean, we can talk about crypto, and crypto has a role in the facilitation of these crimes, but time and time again, it comes back to the traditional architecture.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Greg, is that actually that underlying infrastructure that perpetuates and enables the fraud and the money laundering related there too still remains pretty consistent. Yeah.
Right. It's the same. It's time tested. So for, you know, the folks in the audience that are working KYC, EDD, they're at a financial institution, that threshold is still highly relevant.
Yeah.
Because that is the money flows. So, you know, just hypothetically quickly, you know, it's the kind of thing where, you know, you might have a collector accounts that are just, you know, these kind of rented accounts as opposed to pure straw accounts into a funnel account and then into crypto, right? That's kind of the sequence that we see. But what that means is it all comes back to the financial institutions and a lot of times individual account holders.
Yeah. And I guess we're still seeing the use of shell companies and so forth. Look, I'm going to end the poll.
So, you know, one of the attendees has asked, like, what is this romance scam about? Well, it's not related to the banking industry as such or to the financial industry. But romance scam is simply when you go onto the like dating apps or dating websites and or maybe Instagram, Facebook, and somebody sends you a friend request and then, you know, you connect, they show larger than life pictures of theirs and, you know, they are very rich and this and that. And then you fall in love with them. It could be a male, it could be a female, depending upon what they are trying to target. And they carry it on for approximately 2-3 months. It's not just a one-day thing. It's a very beautifully done social engineering. They are the true artists. And, you know, they will talk to you. Suppose if they say they are a doctor, you'll be able to hear, Dr. Pekka, you're being called into the emergency. You'll hear all those kind of things. And later on, you will believe them. And then they'll say, okay, like Manish, I'm assuming you're from maybe India. And, you know, they'll say, okay, I'm at the airport. Can you, you know, but I've been caught by the customs and I had got some gold for you or gifts for you or something like that, diamonds for you, or a lot of currency for you in dollars. And I've been arrested. Then they make you speak to a fake custom officer. You speak to them and then they say, okay, transfer this kind of money. And, you know, but ultimately, all these people are actors. And so this is what is called as a romance scam because they make you fall in love, carry it out for a period of 2-3 months. And so this is a very, very old thing that's been happening. And by and large, it is the defense who's also targeted. Nowadays, is the defense who's targeted. That's the reason we also call it as like, you know, honey trapping. And otherwise now in India, it's like kind of dying out now.
I think just to be clear to our audience, the term pig butchering as well just is all about the pig is the victim and it's about fattening up the pig. But to Greg's point, there is also a lot of suffering and misery with the fraudsters who are often themselves trafficked into, you know, scam centers in places like Myanmar, increasingly the Middle East and UAE, I'm told as well. And again, the level of sophistication around the social engineering elements cannot be underestimated. Can you all see the results, panel?
Yes.
So I'll just run you through the results, and it's really interesting to see here. We've got so 25% it was payment card fraud, and authorized push payment fraud is 8%, investment fraud 10%. So kind of the boiler room scams that I think Greg alluded to, that sort of thing. There's just many variations of that, isn't there? Insurance fraud, only 1%. Malware and ransomware, 18%. Interesting, I saw an expert in the UK calling for the government to prohibit companies paying malware perpetrators, just a blanket ban. And apparently the UK public sector already has a ban, but the private sector does not. So that was an interesting debate, I thought, as well. AI-based cybercrime, 7%. But to Ritezh's comments about the sophistication of the AI threat here, obviously, I suspect we'll see that starting to grow. But look at that. The winner, actually, is mule accounts. So that kind of backs up Greg's comment that, you know, the infrastructure and the tools, I guess, of the trade for the fraudsters around these activities still remain sort of consistent, maybe, dare I say, old school in some ways, even though the methodology and the attack vectors are using, you know, new technology as they go. So thank you very much for participating, audience. Let's go to a bit of a discussion amongst the panel about how can we help our audience think about what strategies, what systems and controls we need to fight this fraud, whether it's the rising risk of insider threat. And that was really powerful to hear from Ritezh around that, you know. So how can we fight this? Beaver, I'd like to come to you first, please. What's your view on the advice you would give to people? What are you doing in your own organization as well?
Yeah, I think let me just wave onto the question by Tariq as well. He was asking on regulatory expectation from banks in terms of this fraud, and that will dive into what I have to say about what the banks should be doing and so on. I think the regulatory expectation across the region has largely been banks must have some level of defense against all sorts of scams for the customer. Of course, there are certain type of scams like investment scam, romance scam, and even e-commerce scam. That's some of these scams really have very limited participation on the bank side because it's really an authorized payment. Of course, for e-commerce, there's another spin to it. But I think the regulatory expectation then is to have a basic layer of surveillance, some form of defense against all this style of scam. And in terms of customer treatment, I think the expectation as well is largely to treat the customer with fairness and also to consider cases on a compassionate basis for people under financial hardship. I think that's really the regulatory expectation. Now, in terms of what the banks can do, I think banks can do typically is to beef up the surveillance capability. I think Gregory was talking about mules account and all that. I think there is another spin to it because mules are typically accounts that actually they get innocent parties to come in, offering them incentives to open up accounts. And it's really difficult from the CDD KYC perspective to identify all these people. They could be just normal folks that you have, students, all the way to senior citizens and on. So the way I looked at it is probably to beef up some form of friction from your bank's perspective to make your bank a little bit more unattractive to mules using your facilities. Unfortunately, it's counterintuitive. If your facilities are really not that good to use, with a bit of added friction, then the incentive to open an account at your site to run a mule account is actually it actually works in your favor to a certain extent. Of course, the customer experience is to balance the customer experience. That friction that you added has to balance with the customer experience as well. Unfortunately, really, that's another way to look at it, and I think that's really one of the strongest control you can put in place. To fight the mule account, which is, to be honest, is the KYC profile that we have seen so far. It's really very common folks that you see, students, housewife, and so on.
Yeah, so again, really focusing on the effectiveness of your KYC programs. Would you agree with that? And then maybe looking at the specific, I guess, profiling maybe through maybe dynamic CDD as well.
Yeah, I always think it's two-way. One is the CDD, the other one is the surveillance component as well.
Okay, so look, this is really important stuff we're hearing. So we need to understand the psychology, the fact that they go after human emotions that are primeval, in terms of the need. Then they play on urgency and all that stuff. That's really interesting stuff. Let's not forget that. But Ritezh, let's come to you. You're very much in the cyber digital space. But what's your take on our best methods to prevent and mitigate this tidal wave of fraud that we're facing? How can we combat it?
So I think, firstly, the boards need to, wake up. Because everyone is having a challenge in telling the boards, in explaining to them that why we need to focus more and more, why the controls need to become more strict. but somewhere it is not on their top priority. So for me, it's all about the boards. Second thing, uh, everyone is under the assumption that we won't be hacked. It's just not possible. Like, something like death, taxes, and hacking. These three things are going to happen. Come what may. You're not immortal. You're not unhackable. You will be. Probably you're already hacked and you're not even aware about it. So what I'm trying to tell you, at that point of time, if we go with this particular thing that, yeah, I will be hacked, then automatically I start thinking, how can I minimize the impact? So we need to start working on when this happens, but provided we accept this, that this will happen. And I'm telling everyone, it is going to happen. You're going to be here. I'm going to be over here. Today, people are saying it's just 7%, they have polled for AI cybercrimes. After 6 months, you do this poll, they will be saying, okay, 30% of them would be saying that, I mean, this will be like topping the charts as such. So the resilience. So one is, how do I minimize the impact? And the second thing is the resilience. What am I going to do to bounce back? Lastly, is my incident response team ready? Because, Beaver were talking about the malware, which he was not expecting in Singapore and other countries. The thing is, if we are going to be attacked, now we have a ransomware, which is a version 3.0. Ransomware has evolved. It would first come, cripple your machines, paralyze your machines. You wouldn't be able to open your files. Then, we would say we have a backup. Now what they do, then the ransomware version 2.0 came, wherein they said that we've taken your data. Now, even if you have a backup, I'm going to release this data. So you better pay me in Bitcoins, in cryptocurrency. Now the version 3.0 has come. If you say, I am not going to pay you, and I also have the backup, the cyber criminals are saying, fine, we are going to go to your clients. We are going to go to your customers, to your associates, to your partners, and inform everybody that this data of yours is out with us and we are going to leak it. And what happens? Like everyone, the customers or the stakeholders or partners, directors, they start coming back and they say, listen, this data is out. Please do something. If it's required, please pay. So this is the time when your incident response team needs to be there, because from where will you arrange that kind of crypto? Like in India, it's very difficult to arrange crypto through the legitimate routes, because you need to do KYC, you need to, and it can't be that fast enough. And these are organized gangs. Like as Gregory mentioned, these are organized gangs. Each gang of a ransomware has got approximately 300 people. And after the FBI raided them last time, Lockbit was raided, their servers were got down. They have now decided, all these gangs, that we are not going to settle less than 3% of the company's turnover. So this is where we are. So I think, the prevention part of it, I'll speak in the next round. But as of now, let's wake up is what I would want to highlight upon.
Yeah, so it is going to affect your organization no matter where you are, no matter how big or small you are. Really interesting. Gregory, what's your take on how organizations and all of us can fight this and combat this more effectively?
Yeah, I think, it's important to differentiate between the different crime typologies as well, in terms of what's happening with frauds and who are the victims there versus the cyber intrusion and cyber-enabled crime with ransomware, for example, business email compromise. Because I think that in terms of community education and outreach, the one group, the business community, is easy to get to because they self-promote and populate or cross-pollinate information. And so that kind of gets out and people learn quickly. And reason why you have 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, right? It's always this kind of evolving match with the bad guys. As for banks, looking more towards your typical victim of an online fraud, of a romance fraud, advance fee fraud. I mean, I'm looking at the SCMP today. Hong Kong IT professional scammed out of Hong Kong 2.7 million after investing in gold via sham platform that started as a romance scam, right? So this is an educated professional, met somebody online, I mean, just the simplest rule of thumb is you should never be giving money to somebody that you've never personally met.
Yeah, but interesting point, Gregory. Yeah, because I always wonder, why would you pay someone money we've never met? I always tell my team the scammers are getting lazier, because in the good old days, right, they turn out in person, right? They buy you dinner, they romance, they give you some bit of romance here and there. Now everything is online, on the chat, and then you just fall in love.
Exactly, because they've scaled it, and they're operating call centers in the Philippines or in Burma, etc. So, it's that sort of tradecraft is no longer needed, because you're just doing volume. But I think, and I had this conversation with some banker friends of mine the other day. I'm like, what do you all do in terms of customer outreach and education, and passing along simple tips like that, or flagging transactions? Like, if you have a retiree, it's kind of this reverse KYC in a way. It's like, the persona and the profile of this customer. Should they be sending a wire transfer to overseas, for example, as a hypothetical, right? I don't know the answer to that, but in terms of what can banks do, I think one is, it's these sorts of questions. What kind of public service announcements can we put out that are, I mean, very simple, like, just, if you've met somebody online and they want money from you, you should never give them money.
But the interesting part about all this public education, or that I spoke to reporters once, and interesting observation: the people who read the news don't get scammed, and it's the majority who don't read the news, they get scammed. Yes. So they react to the material,
and that's an awareness campaign. So that begs the question: is how do you get to those people? And the common denominators, all of them have a relationship with their bank on some level.
And unfortunately, the situation in Singapore is actually quite different, because we are in a high trust society. Right. We seem to trust everything, and the government has made it so trustworthy for everybody, right? So when you see somebody calling you from government official, pretending to be a government official, the trust level is very high. So the ability to critically question whether that is a scammer or what, it's somehow is lacking, because of the whole way the Singapore landscape works. So that's another issue that we have as well. How do we get them effectively and not let them click away? I think we tried a lot of things, right? If you go banking, we pop up so many things, are you sure you want to proceed and all that? I think there's a pop-up fatigue. Everybody just click away, and they don't read, and they don't pause, and they don't think. And that's where the problem is as well, right?
But one of the comments,
it becomes almost operationalized. People aren't really. I mean, I listen. Having moved to Singapore a year ago, Beaver, I have accounts with Singaporean banks, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I must admit, after a while, it becomes white noise.
You just don't read, right?
So I would just want to tell Beaver, don't do the same mistakes what India has been doing, what the people of our country has been doing. And so it's very important that whenever I am called onto the TV channels and they tell me, like, what is that you would advise, being a technical guy? I said, in fact, being a guy from technology, I would tell you 3 tools to download, but these are not 3 technical tools. And so on Instagram right now, there is something that's trending, which is called as POV, point of view. Everybody puts that on Instagram. So, but here the POV is, first, my P starts from practice the pause. That's come up by my wife, who's a cyber psychologist, and her job is to profile such cyber criminals. So first is practice the pause. Whatever you see, whatever you read, whatever you hear, especially in this time of AI and misinformation. Let's not forget, this is going to be an election year, not just in India, but in America and many other countries. So pause. Then go to the second tool, which is the PO. O will be zero. Zero trust. When it's got anything to do with any sensitive thing, please go with the zero trust. The moment you see it's a zero trust, you will automatically go to the third tool, which is V, which is verify. So if this Hong Kong guy had done that, he said, okay, he's asking me to transfer $25 million. Let me again verify. Let me not trust this cyberspace. Like, I wouldn't want to trust anything, even if it's on Zoom. We've seen what's been happening as such. In fact, forget this, like the kind of devices we are using, the IoTs and all. And then, a casino got hacked because of a fish tank. And now banks will also get hacked. There are organizations that have got hacked because of forget the printer. I'm talking about the toner inside the printer, which has got the ink in it. Now that's being hacked to enter into the network. So,
wow.
So for all these things, especially when it is to do with something that's sensitive could be giving away the credentials, giving away data, or transferring money. Please follow these three things, like, pause, zero trust, and verify.
Brilliant. Ritezh, I think that's amazing. Now, look, panel, we want to take some questions from the audience. We had some great questions coming in. We are going to go slightly over our allotted time today, but I think it's such an important topic, and I want to give us the chance to comment on some of the questions from the audience. So thank you to everyone who's put in questions so far. So I'm just going to pick out a few at random. So I've got one here. A question is quite a broad question. How can AI fraud be tackled? Big question. How can we fight specifically this rise of generative AI, deep fakes? What can we be doing to fight that? Who would like to tackle that one?
I'll take this, Pekka. I think I've been speaking day in, day out on the channels over here. As I told you, AI-based scams are absolutely realistic. You need to, number one, put a lot of pressure on the social media intermediaries, the regulators, the governments. That because, like, for example, take a deep nude as such. A deep nude is nothing. You just take a photograph, upload it, and within 20 seconds, it will give you the nude image of that particular person. Now, it is the responsibility of that platform to say this is AI generated. When you're using a voice cloning software, it is the responsibility to put something that this has been cloned, and especially when it comes on the social media platforms and other kind of things. But now what do you do when you see something like, let me tell you about a grandparent scam, which has just recently happened in India. Almost on a daily basis, at least 100 people are getting calls from their relatives abroad, the relatives' children, who are saying, "Auntie, please transfer this money because I'm not able to transfer in Indian rupees. I'll give you the dollars." And the auntie transfers it. But what was it? This was the voice call. This was the voice cloned. It was a machine speaking. It's done its social engineering part. It's done the surveillance, and it is targeting all those aunties and uncles over here. So verify for everything. At this point of time, there is no technology, not even an AI, to verify it. In fact, when we have written letters on ChatGPT and we have gone back to the other AI platforms to ask whether it is human written or it is AI written, it would say 99% this is human written. So even AI is not able to do. So verification is your only tool as of now. For example, how will you verify from me? You will say, okay, Ritezh, pick up something which is blue in color around you. I'll say, okay, here it is. That's blue. Or I'll say, this is blue. Now you're dealing with a human. Yes, we've come to this particular point.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so looking at some other questions here. So the question here is from Alvin. Thank you, Alvin. If you are to prioritize enhancing or improving AML fraud prevention framework within your organization, with consideration to your respective AML CTF national risk assessment, in which line of defense would you focus? Frontline, KYC compliance, or audit? Would your prioritization be the same in the case of countering terrorist financing? Wow. Okay. So, Beaver, I don't know if you have a view for that question.
I think the first line of defense is where you really have to prioritize your strengthening of your framework and your priority as well. I think that's where the entry point is. It's if you rely entirely on your transaction monitoring or your transaction surveillance, that's really the last line. We always tell our internal stakeholders that the first line of defense, which is the onboarding, your last line is really that line to hold that last fight, to hopefully catch something at the end of the day. Because surveillance platform, transaction monitoring, a lot of these platforms are for AML, is post factor. The money is basically gone. So you're only reporting something that's gone. So if you look at it from that perspective, you should have caught it on the onset. That is where you gatekeep the people that you are letting in. So it's very important that you build up your first line of defense, create that awareness, which is what we are doing at OCBC. We are building that awareness with the frontliners, and we are incentivizing, we're giving the recognition to frontliners who persuade customers that this is a scam or this is a fraud happening. You know, you got to watch it. And we actually celebrate these winners, this frontline staff who actually help the public, the customers. So I think that's really the first starting point for any type of program, the first line. And on the part of the majority, that's 70% of victims are below the age of 40 in Singapore. 70%. It's not a small percentage. 70%. It's just that the news reports on the old elderly folks because the impact is harder on them, and they're not really the majority. Majority is the 70% of those people under 40. And fortunately, I'm not within that 70%.
Neither am I, sadly, Beaver. I only wish. Looking at the youthful good looks of my fellow panel, I'm not going to comment on who else falls within that category. But look, here's another question, and obviously this webinar is in association with the Asian Banking Association. So we've got banks here, guys. So the question here from Hussein is, for customer frauds and social engineering scams, where does the responsibility of the bank end? That's quite an interesting conceptual question, maybe a practical question as well. Who would like to field that one, panel?
Well, I can comment.
I'll come to Greg first and then perhaps bounce. Greg?
Well, no, just because it kind of came up with the question I posed in this reverse KYC, right? And, you know, looking at the onboarding to begin with, and then what kind of transactional filters you might set up for a customer. But, you know, for susceptible, you know, bank patrons who might be sending a wire that is outside the norm of what you would expect for their behavior. I mean, what does it take to have a questionnaire before the wire goes out? You know, did you meet this person online? How well do you know this person? I mean, that sort of thing, how burdensome would that sort of threshold be to implement? Because the social engineering is sophisticated. It does take time. You know, we heard the term, you know, a couple of months for sure, right? I mean, this is repetitive contact, but it's all online. You know, it's, oh, I'll come to visit you. Oh, I got stuck at the airport, and it can never happen, right?
It's never that, by definition, there's never going to be that physical meeting.
That's right.
Even if at some point there is a AI generative person, or there's an,
right.
I've heard of some scams with an actor gets a model, they get a model to actually do a real voice call.
All the time, you know, we've seen this in other instances where, you know, folks are duped into becoming drug couriers based off of romance scams and things like that. But they've never met. It's always the promise to meet, and they never meet. But those are simple questions from the bank's perspective. I think that would be, now I don't know how practicable that would be to implement, but I just kind of put that out there because we always think from, you know, that outreach. How do we educate the general public to protect victims? You know, how difficult or onerous is that to implement?
Yeah. I mean, Beaver, did you have a comment on that question about where
no, I agree. I mean, from the responsibility of the banks, I think the challenges with authorized scams, meaning things like investment scams, things that you're social engineered to do it. Like, I think the problem we have, one of the things that hurt the most is really the government official impersonation scam. Many a times they get hold of the older folks, and the older folks are when they receive a call claiming to be from the police, claiming to be from some official, you know, trapping you up for money laundering. Even though they're not involved, they get very impacted to act on it, to deposit the money into some holding account. And many a times, even for us, our branch staff, our staff at the branch, try to convince the customer that actually this is probably a scam. We see a lot of pushback, and they tend to want to spin the story to tell you that, no, it's for my friend and for this and for that. So from a bank perspective, it's actually a very challenging thing to do, to react as well. Now, in terms of social responsibility, I think realistically, authorized scams is something the banks it's very difficult on banks' end to take responsibility for, because it's authorized completely. I think from the bank's perspective, what we can do is offer some form of empathy. And, you know, when things happen, if you have financial hardship, I think you bring up to the case to any bank in Singapore. You know, we could have a discussion on financial hardship. whether could we make a goodwill payment or something like that. I think the banks are most banks in Singapore are open to this kind of discussion, but definitely would not be the bank's responsibility completely 100% liable on the bank that you make that transaction yourself knowingly, and it's really an authorized transaction.
Yeah. Ritezh, you had a comment?
Yeah. I would want to just say over here that, I think there is a lot of responsibility of the banks, and no way we should say that it should end, because at the end of the day, we as customers, we entrust the bank to take care, to be the safeguardian of our money. So, and especially with AI, ML coming over there, you are able to see what is happening in the mule accounts as such. You suddenly see a lot of payment coming in and immediately going out. So I think AI can do that very, very fast, and it can flag off. Now, even like, as Beaver said, that even if you have tried to tell the fellow, the customer that, look, this looks risky, and he still says that, then fine, record it, and now it's his responsibility. But otherwise, the bank needs to implement AI, ML, and the other emerging technologies to flag off such transactions, to understand the profiles of, such transactions. Secondly, in India, we've implemented something that's been very successful. We have a dedicated call center number. I mean, it's only for financial crimes, and the number is 1930 for the ones who are in India. Please understand this. The moment the financial crime happens, now this number belongs to the police, the cybercrime financial unit. So moment you call up over there and say, this is my 13-digit transaction number, and I have given away, let's say, 6 lakh rupees, 600,000 rupees. They have created an entire software through which wherever the money is gone, and let's say even if it has gone 3 steps ahead, to 3 different banks, at all the places, the money gets frozen. Then the victim needs to go to the police, lodge a complaint, and then an investigation will happen, which generally gets over in like 5 days, and the money comes back. So it's only when the person has converted into crypto and sent out or withdrawn through an ATM, it becomes very difficult. Otherwise, millions of rupees have been returned back to the victims as such.
So what I'm going to do now is come to each of you in turn and ask you to give our audience one practical recommendation for the year ahead to help combat fraud. So who shall I start with? Ritezh, I'm going to start with you, just because you happen to be first on my screen. Ritezh, what's your practical advice to our audience?
In this era of artificial intelligence, and we've seen what cybercrimes can do, I still maintain that just follow these 3 rules. Practice the pause, go with the zero trust approach, and verify everything. This will save you with many things in your personal and professional life from becoming victims.
Thank you. Thank you. Really eloquently said. Thank you. Greg, over to you. Your practical advice, please.
I would say to consider, a simple procedure that you could implement to educate your customers from an awareness perspective.
So education of the consumers is key. Thank you, Greg. Beaver, over to you.
Yeah, I think from the bank's perspective, I think most of the audience here are bankers. I think the bank's perspective is to push for public-private collaboration, which is what's happening in Singapore as well. We have I have my staff placed with the police at the anti-scam command as well. And I think that the end result is to push for the entire ecosystem to move together with the telcos, together with other intermediaries, payment intermediaries, to come to the table as well, including Facebook, which was famously infamously mentioned by our minister, that they are not playing the game or putting the weight forward for this whole thing, right? You still see scam apps on Facebook. Even as I report them, they tell me that they didn't infringe their community standards as well. So things like this, the whole ecosystem must come together to fight this. If the ecosystem is tight, everybody's involved, I think that's the way forward. Besides the communication part, the education part, and the customer.
Yeah, everyone's got a role to play, whether it's big tech or the regulated sector or the public sector. Thank you, Beaver.
Correct.
Okay, so that's us done, gentlemen. Thank you so much to our panel. What a brilliant panel. Absolute pleasure as always. I knew this would be a great session. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. And thanks ICA and ABA. Thank you so much to both the organizations. Thanks, Pekka. Wonderfully moderated. Thank you.